Welcome back to Small College Conversations. I am Anthony Grassi. Happy to sit down today with Hastings College Director of Athletics, Chris Clements. Chris, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So I'm going to start with you coming back to Hastings. You previously were the women's soccer coach, but then you took kind of a 3-year gap, 3-year hiatus, if we can call it that, to go be the head women's soccer coach at Minot State in Division II. What did you learn during those 3 years that helped you when you came back to be the
AD? I guess first thing is it's a lot colder up north than it is in Nebraska. So
I can imagine.
The climate in Nebraska was suddenly a lot warmer for me. No, I think, whenever I've been lucky enough to have traveled around and to have been at different institutions, whether they be, Division II at University of Central Missouri, where I kind of started, then Avila, then Hastings as a soccer coach, Hastings as an associate athletic director, then Minot State back as a soccer coach. I think you learn so much along the way from those that you interact with. Jeff Van Dusen hired me, took a gamble on me to join his staff at University of Central Missouri. Patty Sartorius took me under her wing when she was here as athletic director. And then Andy Carter hired me at Minot State when I was kind of in a little situation, and we had great conversations in the interview process about, did I want to stay in the AD world? Did I want to go back to the coaching world? And, he kind of said, hey, look, you come coach for me, you're still going to be involved. And I was able to work alongside of him in a leadership group with some other coaches and really just learn from another athletic director. And to me, that's kind of what the whole journey has been about, is learning how other people do things, how other institutions do things, and then providing a vision for myself on how I want to run an athletic department, or how we can do things better at Hastings College, or just kind of change and adapt. Or the great thing is then when we're doing things well and be like, hey, we do this really well compared to other institutions. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, was just learning and seeing how other institutions run, how other athletic directors lead, because that's key. And then finding how I want to lead, the genuineness of how I want to lead and how I want to be an athletic director.
And so as you step back into the chair at Hastings, what were the biggest things you took from all those different stops that you brought into the role, and maybe how have those shifted to fit you over the last few years?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is student athletes are first. It has to be about the student athletes, because, I say this, without student athletes, we don't have a job. We don't get to do what we love to do. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. As an athletic director, we sit in meetings and we have to make decisions. And do we understand that everything we do should be involved and around student athletes? I think the biggest challenge for me was actually not having that close relationship to the 30 or 40 that were on my roster that I actually coached day in and day out and stopped by your office. When you're an athletic director, you don't have that. And I think for me, over the last 4 years, finding that relationship piece still, and seeing our student athletes the day of a game or the day after a game and congratulating them, or saying, hey, that was a tough one, and having conversations, whether they be in the cafeteria, whether they be in between classes, whether they be, coming out of the weight room. I think that was key for me, is kind of understanding at every level, it's all about the student athletes. And I think that's key. And so I would say that was probably the biggest takeaway, was that element right there.
Over the last few years, is there a moment that sticks out where you could point to and say, that is where we, show that student athletes are first? Or is there a moment where that was kind of put to the test, where you have to kind of come back to what your values, what your center is, and then step forward and make an action?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I guess forefront, last night we had our first home men's volleyball game. And, we marketed it as the first collegiate volleyball game in the state of Nebraska. And we probably had 800 people in our arena. for a game. And I think seeing that love that the student athletes hopefully felt on the court, that being a brand new program, not really having a fan base yet, that they're still important, that they're still valued was probably key. Last fall, our women's soccer team hosted the GPAC conference final, and we probably had another 800 or 1,000 people there. And hearing from the visiting fans that is the best experience that they've ever had was key. That's when we're winning, right? That's when we're doing our job right, and we're supporting our student athletes in what they love. That's key. Then on the counter flip side, right? It's when, we don't have that show up, right? We don't have that buy-in. We see that, whether it be, for another sporting event that just, the student athletes are pulled and coaches are pulled in so many directions that we don't have it, or if it's just something on campus, right? A non-athletic event, a speaker that comes and we don't have that. That's when we have to do that reality check and go, hey, we're not there yet, right? Culture is still growing. We're still building, but we got to talk about it, and we've got to put a focus on it as we strive, and we can always get better. And I think that's the key.
I want to go to one thing, as I look back over the things you guys have accomplished during your tenure. One of the things that stood out was the mantra, I guess, you have of your job being to raise the floor for your coaches so that they can reach the ceiling. You mentioned that during your introductory press conference. You mentioned it probably a year and a half ago when you guys launched the Bronco Booster Club, which we'll get to in a little bit. From when you started in 22 to now, can you quantify or measure or kind of put into words how much that floor has been raised?
Yeah, I guess I think that would probably be a question for our coaches, right? Maybe that's my next staff meeting takeaway, right? Is ask that feedback or my one-on-one and say, how has that changed? I met with our women's basketball coach. We had our one-on-one 2 days ago, and I asked her, what's changed in your program, right? When I was here as assistant AD, they were very successful. I left, they took a dip. I came back in year 2 of me being back. They're back there, and now they've been, last year had a great year. It's a final site, and knock on wood, we hope we do the same again this year. What's changed? And she said the changes you made to our scholarship system. And it wasn't necessarily I infused money, right? What I did was, because I was a coach and I was a coach here, I evaluated the flexibility within our scholarship system so that coaches can go get the athletes they want. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I think our coaches would agree with, I hope, is that they have the flexibility when there's an athlete that they want and may not have the GPA that makes it easy to get those athletes, or may not be from the state that makes it easy to get those athletes, that they can still put together a package that competes. And I think that would be key. I hope the student athletes will say that their experience has got better. We have great partnerships with local businesses to help really expand their experience. I came back, we entered a partnership with Highland Dairy, where all of our athletes get protein after every workout or every game. They get chocolate milk, they get regular milk, we get lactose-free milk. And that's an expensive cost, right? If you think about that, it's something basic. You hear all the news that, the best thing to drink after a workout is chocolate milk, but providing that for athletes isn't always easy to do. And we were able to do that with that partnership. We added Bespies, which is our Bronco ESPYs. We didn't really celebrate our student athletes here in a one singular moment at the end of the season that we put together, and we have, the Bronco of the Year award and all different awards. And that came through fruition because we started an ASA program that meets now, and we meet every 2 weeks as ASA. And so they have a voice, and I meet with them and I tell them, I said, you are the voice. I said, you're the voice that can bring about change on our campus and also in the NAI overall. And so we want to hear that. So I think really those elements would be how I would evaluate it and say, I've raised the floor. And so that our coaches could hopefully reach that ceiling a little bit better, but we're still going, right? I think sometimes the floor is moving and the ceiling is moving at all times, and sometimes we're close together and sometimes we're further apart. But that's why we love this job, is that it's ever changing and ever moving.
Yeah, always trying to close that gap as much as you can. Can you, on the scholarship piece specifically, and given you're a former coach at Hastings, you had a better understanding than most probably did when you stepped in, and you can help solve some of the problems that your coaches are having. Can you walk us through what, like, and you can get as into the weeds as you want here, of what changes you were making from a scholarship structure standpoint that ultimately helps all of your coaches bring in the right student athletes into their program as they're trying to build for the future?
Yeah, I'll be vague, right?
Okay.
Don't want to give away
Yeah,
secret sauce,
trade secrets.
right?
I get it.
Like in this, I think the key is that some schools operate. I just shared this with a coach. When I was a first year head coach, I was at a school where I knew that if an athlete didn't have a 26 ACT or higher, I couldn't put together a package that was good enough to be able to show that athlete that we valued them. And so other schools will do kind of like the straight athletic money, where it doesn't matter their academics, right? They just lead with athletic money. And we were able to balance the two, where we wanted to make sure that recruiting good student athletes is still our focus, right? And so we're still reward coaches when they recruit high academic kids, but also give our coaches the opportunity to just go get after those kids. You know, you may have a kid coming out of high school that has a 2.6 GPA because, you know what, they really struggled their freshman, sophomore, junior year, and finally realized their senior year that, oh, hang on, right? Academics has to become important to me because I want to be a student athlete. We still want those athletes to be able to have the package in front of them that makes them feel valued as an academic and also as an athlete. And so that was really the focus, is how do we bridge both of those lines to give the best of both worlds. And I think we're striving to do that. And we evaluate our scholarships, and we will tweak things based upon different sports. Sports recruit differently. You know, the student athletes are not all pigeonholed in the same area. And so every year we're looking at how do we evaluate our scholarship system to make sure that coach can be successful, in their sport, but also academically, but also retention wise. That's the key. And I think we have a great leadership group here that works alongside of me to really evaluate and give us those resources to make sure we know good data to use in order to effectively help our coaches.
I want to go back to the Bronco Boosters Club a little bit that you guys launched summer of 24. What has the financial and maybe structural operational impact that the launch of that has had on your department, finances, coaching responsibilities, et cetera?
Yeah, I think when I came here, we didn't have a booster club. We had what we called Crimson Connection, which was a community involvement that was ran by the foundation. It was great. It was what it was, and it basically provided everybody access to all of the events on campus, but wasn't focused on supporting athletes financially in the journey throughout the way. So I also like to say great credit to my community. The community was extremely valuable in buying into supporting Hastings College, because whenever you make a change, changes are always not for the betterment of everybody, right? And so they really, really bought into that area, and so far we've seen a dramatic growth in that financial, resources for us. Again, being able to provide a Best Bee experience at the end of the year, where we do a food and a dinner and awards show, and we try to make it as good as possible. That's there. When I was here, and not bitter about this, so but I was lucky enough to win a lot of conference championships. And one thing our athletes never got was a conference championship rings. That was something that we couldn't provide. And, some of it was the success of the soccer, both the men's and women's soccer team, where we won them on a regular basis. And so it's an expense year after year. And when I came back, I was like, I don't care if you win 4 straight, you should have 4 conference championship rings. and you leave Hastings College, if you're an athlete that has the ability to win 4 straight conference championship rings, you should have that. And now we have the resources in order to pay for that. So it's not a going after parents and asking them to pay for it, or telling the coach, yes, you can do it if you fundraise. It's absolutely right. Let's get those ordered. So whether you're, a conference championship in track and you're a single event, or whether it's a team event and you're a conference championship, we provide those. And that's funded by our booster club. So the money we raise goes directly back to help the student athlete experience. And again, it's kind of that same thing I started with. That's the number one thing, is student athlete experience, why they're here. And, sometimes I don't know if our student athletes appreciate the experience when they're here, especially if they've been here the whole time we've had these changes. But I know if you spoke to our alums that didn't have that, they'd probably be a little jealous. And that means we're doing the right thing, because we're kind of increasing it. So I think that's our key. It's done that. We did a track renovation. That was all part of our booster club. We provided a unique partnership for our golf teams with our Lockland Country Club now, where they have full access to the country club, to the golf course. I guess not the country club, but the golf course side of it. They can get out there. It doesn't have to be just in practice time. If they want to go to the range and hit balls, they can do that. And I think all of those key things were because we were able to change our booster club and really grow it.
Did that change how much your coaches are involved with fundraising? And did you have a model that you were kind of saying, all right, here's what I think here's somebody who's doing it successfully. We can plug and play a lot of this and maybe switch some of the fine details, whether that's, giving amounts or, benefits, but by and large, here's a good structure that we can push forward from.
Yeah, obviously you do a deep dive. I look at every place I've been at, right? What worked well, what didn't work well. And then looking at conference schools, geographical schools, what are they doing in the element? What are they, how do they set up their booster club? And then we kind of got together and we did a presentation. We brought together basically a working group of alums, community members, business members, and presented it to them first of all and said, this is what makes sense to us. This is why we want to do it. This is our patron levels, the benefits you get at the different levels. And they had some great feedback. And we were like, okay, we're going to keep this and we're throwing this out the window and we've got to think differently in that area. And so it was we took it from a lot of other institutions and then really made it ours and continue to hopefully, tweak and expand upon it and really help it grow.
And how involved are your coaches still with fundraising? Obviously, I imagine they still are to some extent.
They still are. That's the next hurdle.
Yeah.
The next hurdle that we have is that, like a lot of small schools, when I came back, it was kind of like scholarships or budgets. And as a coach, I would have chose scholarships. And as a straw poll of our coaches, they kind of chose scholarships. So we evaluated and invested in scholarships. So our next area and the next, hurdle for me is to really attack our budget shortfulls and to really help increase those areas for our coaches to dramatically reduce the amount that they have to fundraise. And I think that's key. We did partner with a couple of outside companies to really streamline our fundraising so that we're making the most use of the money we raise. And so I think that's helped them dramatically. But, every year the cost just keeps going up. My always example is when I coached, I probably won't name the sandwich shop, but they did $5 footlongs. And you could literally go in there and it was $5 for lunch for your team or $5 for dinner. And now there's not very often a $5 footlong. And it's a $10 footlong now, if not more. And so, it's a changing world and we know that, but our job is to try to figure out how to solve for it.
As Hastings continues to push forward, you guys are adding a handful of sports. You have men's volleyball that's starting season 1 right now. You have men's and women's swimming and diving. You have flag football coming in the next academic year. How do you think about, we talked about setting the floor earlier or raising the floor. How do you think about setting the floor for each of these new programs?
So it's about vision. And it's about me hiring a coach that understands my vision for that sport. Men's volleyball is a great example. We announced we were going to add men's volleyball late spring. We interviewed coaches, and in the interview process, I found a lot of coaches were like, they didn't believe it was possible to recruit and compete spring of 26, which is what we're in. A team, we did not have 10 men's volleyball players on campus walking around hoping that we'd add the sport. And so really was first of all, it's finding a coach that understands the vision that we have as an athletic department and buys into our vision that we have as an athletic department for that sport. And I think we've done a great job hiring the right coaches. Gareth, our men's volleyball coach, was 100% yes, I can do it. In fact, he was so optimistic that sometimes I was like, okay, let's just, if we have 5 or 6, maybe we can do some walk-ons and add to it. And he was like, no, I'm going to have 10, 11 volleyball players and we're going to do this. And I think he's done that. He's done a great job. Not only do we have a team, but we're competing. And we're really trying to set the mark in men's volleyball in Nebraska. And I hope the same thing is the case for swimming and for flag football, is that we have the right coaches in place. They understand the vision. They understand the hard work that goes into those first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And they'll reap the rewards next year in having those athletes on campus competing and having victories, whether they be, personal times, whether they be the first win of the program, or just being able to compete and just having that experience. That's our goal.
You mentioned you have 3 new head coaches for these 3 new sports. You hired 2 new coaches recently. Give me an idea of how you're kind of onboarding these people into these roles, because some people were internal and they're kind of moving around, and helping kind of ingrain them into the culture that you are creating.
Yeah. So I think I have an amazing team, right? Small colleges are fantastic because we all work together, right? We understand the value of athletics. And so whether it be the business office, whether it be financial aid, whether it be admissions, whether it be our SID, our assistant AD, or myself, or fellow coaches, we have an amazing group that says, hey, how can I help? And I think that's key, right? It can't all be me. I sit down, I have an onboarding document that we go through, and we spend about an hour and a half going through this Google Doc that they then have access to. And I think the message I give to them is, you will not remember this, and no, you're not expected to remember this. It's okay to ask questions. My first year as a head coach was at Avila University, and my athletic director, Mike Sharp, and I was an NCAA guy. I came from Division II, and I didn't want to break rules, right? In the NCAA, we've got this, and I was like, I can't go to the NAIA and break a rule, because that would just be laughed at. And so I would walk into his office and I'd be like, hey, there's a sophomore that wants to talk. Can I talk to a sophomore? Hey, it's Christmas time. Am I in a dead period? Am I not in a dead period? And he always had answers for me, and always had an open door, and was able to make me feel comfortable that there wasn't any stupid question. I'm sure he smiled after I left and said, how is this guy asking those questions? But I think that's key for me whenever you bring a new coach in, whether they've had 1 year of coaching experience, no years of coaching experience, or they're a veteran. Every institution has the way that we do things is unique to us, whether it be our scholarship system, whether it be, how we award financial aid. All those areas are unique to us. And our job is to help them understand the system, understand the nuances of the system as soon as possible. And that's done through, like I said, financial aid, business office, admissions is fantastic. We added an athletic admissions representative just this past year. So they have somebody whose their number one focus is to help coaches with questions and get them to the right person. And sometimes it's like figuring out who their admissions counselor is for the individual they're recruiting. But having those people that come to that, everybody comes together to our staff meetings, whether it be student services, whether it be student counseling, services, financial aid, admissions. They are all there for our staff meetings. And so it's an opportunity for us all to share information and to really share ideas and vision of where we want to go. I think that's probably the key to onboarding, is just making sure that everybody knows where they need to go to ask those questions. And then the people that they're asking understand that they're there to be support and to help them. And I think that's key.
I want to dive a little bit into flag football, as that seems to be the sport that, if people are looking to add a sport,
that's right.
That is the sport seemingly of the last year plus. So as of now, there's only one women's flag football program in the state of Nebraska. When you guys start, there will be 3, and then Nebraska is also adding the sport the following year.
Yep.
Between that, the growth within the college space, what we will soon be coming growth within the high school space, as not a sanctioned sport yet. What is the vision for the program? And do you think the broader, every time somebody adds an Olympic sport, when I read through the release, there's the mention of the Olympics being here in 28. You have a different, maybe, initial benchmark of the Nebraska Cornhuskers are adding flag football. Does that have an impact on where you think the vision for this program can go?
Well, I think the 3 other schools that will have it before them, we're just trendsetters, and UNL just followed us. So, but no, I think it shows where athletics is going. We just celebrated, Women in Sports Day, and I believe this is just a testament to where it's growing and going in America today. For us personally, our 3 hotbeds across America of recruiting for us as a school, not just in athletics, obviously Nebraska, right? Obviously our backyard is huge for us. We want to make sure that the kids from Nebraska have somewhere to go and compete, either athletically, or at least come and get an education, educationally wise, academically. Second is Colorado, and third is Arizona, in no order there. And if you look at Colorado and Arizona, flag football has been and is growing dramatically. And so when we know that a lot of our student population comes from Arizona and Colorado, we feel like that's where we're going to get our first influx of flag football athletes. And I think followed by Nebraska. Nebraska is going to be right there with it. We've seen this in, not to go steal from men's volleyball, but in a year in men's volleyball has grown so much in the state of Nebraska. Where inaugural high school seasons are happening, and high school, leagues are going on. I think that's going to happen with flag football. It's going to grow dramatically in such a short period of time. We looked at women's wrestling before we added women's wrestling and how fast that was growing. I think flag football is growing even faster than women's wrestling did. And I think that's just going to create such an environment, such a fun environment. It's a fast-paced, entertaining game that is going to be great for college campuses.
Chris, I'll get you out on these last 2 questions, more big picture. First, where are you finding inspiration and how you think about leading the department forward?
I think first, we have an amazing president. One of the reasons why I came back, Dr. Rich Lloyd has a very interesting journey, and was a professor here, was a student athlete here at Hastings, and was a coach here. So talk about somebody who understands what our coaches, what our student athletes do. He understands that. And so I think that's key. Rich is not afraid to listen to my ideas and to go, yeah, let's think about this. Let's grow this, right? Let's see how we get there. So I think that's one of them. I think the GPAC is one of the strongest conferences in our eyes, right? Everybody obviously says that, but we've got a great commissioner and we have a great group of athletic directors. And we have, monthly meetings virtually where we come up with the agenda, right? We're like, what do we want to learn about? What do we want to discuss? And we literally take time sharing how we do things. and what we're working on our campus. And I think that's a great, having that camaraderie and having the openness to be able to share and talk about what's happening on our campuses, what we're thinking about, where we're expanding, is huge. And then I think it's just having the relationship with your athletes and your coaches to where you can ask them, not to steal a line from a TV show, but the question I ask is, how can I help? What are you struggling with? How can I help? And I think that's a key, because I may not be able to help, but at least I know what they're struggling with. And it gets me thinking about, okay, how can we change the way we do things, right? How can we think outside the box in order to do things? I think, in college athletics right now, student athlete insurance is something that we have to figure out, right? We have to figure out how to provide insurance to student athletes without breaking the bank, or without passing on all the costs again to student athletes. Whether it's coming together as a collegiate group, as an NAIA group, and we have to be able to figure those things out. So there's so many things that are going on right now that we have to, as athletic directors, as college presidents, as commissioners, really put our heads together and say, how do we do this, right? For the collective good, right? It's not just about your institution, but it's about the collective good of athletics. So I think those are the elements we have to have. We all have mentors that we turn to and we speak to and we bounce ideas off. And having those is key.
My last question for you is, over the next, call it calendar year, your top 1, 2, 3 priorities, initiatives, things that are taking up space in your brain, what would those be?
Raising money. So kind of changing a little bit of how we do things here at Hastings. We had a departure of an assistant AD. We're lucky we're bringing in a Hastings College alum who's been a athletic director at the high school level for many years to kind of come in and take some of the daily responsibility away from me so I can focus on raising money. That's my next thing. Like you said at the beginning, the challenge I had for myself was to raise the floor so coaches can reach the ceiling, and raising money has to be key for that, whether it's through growth of our booster club, whether it be through yearly commitments from alumni to give back to their programs, just so we know that year after year we have a residual income coming in that coaches can count on to offset their budgets. I would say that would be number one. Second would be, I think, student athlete insurance. That cost continues to grow, and whether it be building discounted relationships with local partners, from hospitals to clinics to physical therapists, or whether it be working on the ability to come together as a bigger organization, that has to be in the forefront of our mind. And then probably third, but probably still first, is continuing to support our student athletes. As we grow in the athletic department, and as we grow on the number of coaches on our campus and athletes on our campus, is making sure that we don't lose sight of the vision of who we want to be and what keeps us focused each and every day. Understanding that cultural piece, that it is our job as coaches and as administrators to lead that for our student athletes. As you grow and add sports, that can get watered down, right? We have to have the continual vision and desire to grow, to compete, to educate, and to make sure our student athletes have an amazing experience.
Excellent feedback. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today, providing all these insights on Hastings.
No problem. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.